Welcome back to the third episode of Truthful. My name is once again Brian, and I'm here with my two distinguished guests, Dr. Fanwar and Dr. Gerard. We welcome both of you again to our podcast today.
Thank you, Brian.
Thank you.
Well, in the previous episodes, we have examined the challenges to Bible translation from language and literary perspectives. Dr. Fanwar, what is the challenge in this episode today?
Well, most Bible students by now are aware that we do not have any of the original writings,
Yes.
what are known as autographs.
So what do we have
Not
then?
one exists. What we have are copies of copies of copies.
Oh my. So when we say copies of copies of copies, what does that mean?
We call them manuscripts or
okay.
MSS for short. So you won't see the whole word in most writings.
Yeah.
But if you see MSS, then it means it's a manuscript.
Dr. Gerard, probably you can provide us some examples of the MSS in the New Testament.
Oh, yes, sure. But before I do that, I want to remind our listeners that MSS or manuscripts are evaluated in very specific ways.
Okay.
Not all manuscripts.
So they are gradings.
Yeah, not all manuscripts have the same value, actually.
That's interesting. Can you explain a little further?
Well, basic criteria for manuscript selection are, number one, proximity to the original writing. Okay, is it within 50 years, within 100
yes.
years, within 400 years?
Yes.
For instance, most of the manuscripts used in the King James Bible translations were quite far away from the original writings. Okay, so that creates a bit of a problem. The second factor is this, the degree of reliability, and that's usually has to do with how error-free a manuscript is.
Yeah.
We can actually detect things like typographical or insertion of notes or mistakes that a copyist made. They didn't have computers, they didn't have ChatGPT, okay, they did by hand under very dim light. Third is the standardization process.
Yes.
Because both Judaism and then later Christianity went through a process of pulling all these copies and then deciding what would be the standard copy. Okay, and so what we are dealing with today, whether you talk Hebrew Bible or the Greek New Testament, are the standard copies. They're not the original writings. Those do not exist.
It sounds very complicated.
I suppose it is, but I think anybody who's serious about the word would be prudent. And prudence here is not about being smart or clever or having high IQ. It's about wanting to know what really happened. So which one can we rely on? Because pick up any English version and it's just a translation. It's a translation of copies of copies of copies. And so you need to know what are the standard copies accepted for the Old Testament by the Jews and Christians, and for the New Testament by Christians.
Yes.
And doing that makes you an intelligent student of the word.
I like that. Intelligent student, Dr. Gerard.
Yes, I would also like to add to that, understanding this, this criteria helps us to avoid one of the most common fallacies of, regarding the scripture text, because some people believe that the Bible that we have, the text that we have, has been like downloaded from some divine source. It's like, you have it, there you are.
Yes.
We can avoid that if you understand the criteria here.
So let's go back to the New Testament. Is there any samples there?
Yes. There are hundreds of manuscripts in the New Testament, even thousands actually. Some are partial manuscripts. As compared to the Old Testament, New Testament has a lot more manuscripts. Some are, this fragments of manuscripts. But the oldest known manuscripts containing the entire, complete New Testament is what we call the Codex Sinaiticus. Okay, this is the oldest.
Is this used in the Bible translations?
They use it to refer as reference to refer to some of the manuscripts, old manuscripts.
So meaning that there are references to that, right?
Yes, Actually, to verify meaning,
Okay.
because you have different codex, different manuscripts. So you read this in this way, so you check that to verify meaning. But the translation that we have today comes from a more standardized text. It is not just these fragments of manuscripts or manuscripts here, manuscripts there. They put the manuscripts together and they standardized it.
So there is a standard translation that is being referred to.
Yes, and the first standardized text was completed in somewhere in early 16th century, around 1516, by a scholar, a Dutch scholar called, his name was Erasmus. Okay, this manuscript was called Textus Receptus.
I've heard it.
Okay, it simply means received text.
Textus Receptus.
And this becomes the basis for the translation of the King James Bible, King James Version.
Okay.
This is the first one. Well, we do have others actually.
Old Testament, Dr. Fanwar.
The standard Hebrew manuscript is called the Masoretic text, or MT for short. What most people don't realize is the Masoretic text was completed near the end of the 10th century AD.
That's already
It's almost 1,000 years after Jesus, so it's not even from the Old Testament era or intertestamental era. But we do have other that are considered kind of standard texts as well, that are older than the Masoretic. There's one in Greek known as the Septuagint, or LXX in designation. It's about 300 BC, that's 300 years before Jesus. Okay, the oldest manuscripts we have in Hebrew are the Dead Sea Scrolls, okay, which were only discovered in 1947. Okay, they were lost. The Qumran community hid them in those caves to prevent the Romans from getting their hands on it during the Roman-Jewish wars. But the oldest manuscript we have of the Torah itself is actually a Samaritan text. It's called the Samaritan Pentateuch, which is probably 4th century BC. Okay, a bit older than the Septuagint and
that could be the earliest.
the Dead Sea Scrolls. The Dead Sea Scrolls are from the time of Jesus, the time of John the Baptist. Okay, so the Dead Sea Scrolls are almost 1,000 years older than the Masoretic text. Okay, so even though all Bible translations today follow the MT, but good translators will always refer back to these older versions to see how they match up.
So what is the preferred mode among translators today?
Most translators are still dependent on the standardized text, okay, for manuscript. Whether you talk about the MT for
Masoretic.
Old Testament, the TR is not used so much anymore for the New Testament
Textus
because
Receptus.
there are newer standardized texts.
Okay.
But I think if you're asking about what was their preferred mode today, the sheer volume of manuscripts available forces translators to be more eclectic. So while we're looking at one particular standard text, we also want to look at all the others that exist, because you can't ignore them. Their existence, especially for the New Testament, is more headache for the New Testament, because there's so many manuscripts, and you want to know for sure, does this verse exist? Did the story really happen, or is there another version? Stuff like that.
So even though the reference are quite standardized, but when it comes to English translations, we can really see there are a lot of variations written in a slightly different way from each other.
Yep.
So why is that so?
Well, I guess it probably has something to do with translation philosophy.
Okay.
And the speed at which the English language is changing.
Yes.
You will encounter new words in English, and the way it is expressed. For example, you can just compare the King James Bible and the modern translation. You will find some different way of looking at the English actually.
Yeah, we call that more classical probably. Today's English is a little more modern.
Yeah.
And it's still changing. It is
Probably
still
with
changing
the
because of
Gen
social.
Alpha now.
Yeah, with social media, English is changing.
Yes, and
Short forms.
and you have what you call the Gen Z Bible. It's a very different way of putting the Bible.
But yet some Bible verses seem to sound the same in most translations, going back to in the beginning. That can never change, right?
Yeah.
That can never change.
This brings us back to the concept that we covered in video 1, which is translation convention.
Convention.
The idea is don't reinvent the wheel.
Yeah.
When the tires for cars were invented, they've stayed more or less the same shape and form and
Yeah,
even
it's still
content
round.
until today. It's just a matter of whether they're
But
wider
the
or
body,
lower. Yeah,
it's a
the same.
different.
So even the EV electric vehicle makers are not reinventing the wheel. I mean, literally speaking. Okay, but I think what we are paying attention to here is that the presence of newer manuscripts forces us to examine some things. Let me give you an Old Testament example. According to the Masoretic text, the Goliath in the David Goliath story would be about 3.5 meters tall.
Yes.
However, in the Septuagint, he's only 2.5 meters tall. Okay, he's just a basketball player size. He's not. So you get a totally different impression of Goliath. So is the Septuagint correct because it had older manuscripts that we no longer possess, or is the Masoretic correct because it has later manuscripts that came along the way? So issues like that you can't ignore. You can't depend on translation convention. Okay. And so if you look at most modern translations, they will give you the option and tell you according to LXX, it's only 2.5 meters, but the Masoretic says 3.5 meters. Now, 3.5 meters sounds more imposing for Goliath. So we may prefer that.
I would prefer that.
2.5 is basically Yao Ming's height.
Yao Ming, even Shaquille is not that.
Yeah. And so it's like, okay, maybe he's not that big after all. But there are many other things where details are missing in the Masoretic text that we are forced to look at some other manuscript. For instance, if you try to discover how long King Saul was king over Israel, you cannot find in the Masoretic text. There is a missing number. In fact, there's a missing part of a number. So the only part that is maintained in the Masoretic is the number 2. And it looks like Saul was king for only 2 years. No. But definitely not for 40 years because the number ends in 2. So options are 2 years, 12 years, 22 years, 32 years, 42 years. We don't know for sure. So we have to refer to Dead Sea Scrolls, to Septuagint, to some newer like the Leningrad Codex, which matters a lot in Old Testament translation, to figure out. The consensus today is more or less that probably his reign was only about 22 years. But I think that is more of an averaging of numbers than anything else to get that. So that is a problem. That is a manuscript problem because something may be missing or something may be added. And then you have to decipher why it was added. So new translations may remove it from the text and put it in a footnote. Somebody who's used to an old English translation, hey, wait a minute, this Bible is missing, this verse is missing, where did it go? No, it didn't go anywhere, it wasn't there to begin with.
Well, let's just probably take one text, John 3:16. Would that fall into that category? Maybe Dr. Gerard, you'd like to elaborate on that?
You mean the translation convention, yeah? Yeah, I would say it falls into that category, like, for God so loved the world. If you read it at most English translations, you will see that translation put in that way. But when you read the Greek text and you refer to other manuscripts, you could actually translate it slightly different way, like what one version does, the HCSB does. It does like for God loved the world in this way.
Okay.
You know, so when we translate it conventionally, some people may think that for God so loved the world, as if to say, for God loved the world very much in that way. But perhaps the so there can also be translated, if you follow the Greek manuscript, Greek text, God loved the world so, or like this, in this way. You know, so certainly John 3:16 is
of course,
in that
John
category.
3:16 is also carrying some theological
Correct.
thoughts in it, and it is also debatable, for some
Yes.
people. So
Yeah.
maybe Dr. Fanwar.
I think what Dr. Gerard is saying is that the manuscripts show us that the text is richer than we think, because it allows two very different meanings, but that are totally complementary to each other. One
Yes.
is the manner of God's love. The other one is the extent of God's love. So when you just say God so loved the world, are you talking about the manner of His love or about the extent of His love? We actually need both, don't we, when we're trying to understand God's love? How does God love us, and how much does He love us?
Yes.
So you need two different translations to get both readings, because you can't have both readings in one translation. And that is why Bible Gateway is still a better option than any single version.
And of course, when when the author mentions about He gave His only begotten Son, so if we would like to probably go back to our first episode and second episode, and seeing that this concept of sacrificing, basically giving the Son in order to prove that He loves the world in this manner. In translation wise, how does that work?
Let me say something before. I think this is Dr. Gerard's jurisdiction or territory. But we have to understand Hebrew thought in order to understand that, because terms like father and son are not necessarily biological.
Correct.
Okay, and so this is the whole debate for hundreds of years in Christian history about the nature of Christ. It's a misunderstanding of just the word son, never mind the other words that accompany it. I think he will comment on it. And so we have to bring that into perspective, because that is evident to the early Christians, who were mostly Jewish, Hebrew speakers, evident in Old Testament, but modern Christians reading backward with our understanding of son as a biological thing affects our understanding. It actually changes the theology, because this son was not born from some human genetic stuff. Yes, he became human, so his birth was entirely different from any other son. Okay, yes, son of Joseph, but not son of Joseph. He's son of God, kind of thing. And so all relational terms in Hebrew thought, father, mother, son, brother, sister, even wife, okay. Why does Solomon in Song of Songs call his wife my sister? I mean, would you call your wife sister? I think she will probably kill you if you did that. It's an illegal relationship in our terms today, because we have a biological understanding of these words, but not so in the Bible. So the rest, the begotten stuff, I leave to him.
Yeah, I mean the issue about begotten here, as if to say that Jesus was born of the
him,
Father, and so we have today theology such as he came out from the Father, was born of the Father. I don't know how, but it is we do find such view. But the idea, we have to look at that text from the Old Testament perspective. We have already established, in scholarly world, that the text in John has so much Hebraism into it. And so Dr. Fanwar has mentioned about the idea of that, the father, mother, and so on and so forth. We have to bring that into that context as well. Now, for God loved the world, He gave His his begotten son, as if he's giving birth to son. But the word there is, if we are to translate it literally, it is probably can best be captured as in one and only son. Not so much on a biological birth, but it is referring to the one unique, the one who is not equal to anyone, is the one and only son, you know. And so we cannot say that son is biological.
Yes.
We have to think as it is related to how the Old Testament puts it, you know.
Well, that's really a very enriching discussion. But of course, when we talk about translations here in the New Testament, especially when we look at John 3, which is not very far from John 1 that we have discussed in the previous 2 episodes. So that's where it actually looks quite, what do you call that? It's a little bit surprising, you know, when we talk about Logos, the word Davar, and the word became flesh, you know, and live among us, you know. And here, but of course, basically, the context of John chapter 3, you know, this part is, you know, just a little way down, right? But before that, of course, the discussion with Nicodemus was another thing. Right?
Yeah,
another thing altogether. But anyway, I'm sure that our friends and listeners are still quite excited to follow us along in the next episode. It has been a very invigorating conversation, and I would like to thank Dr. Fanwar and Dr. Gerard for being with us in this episode, and I'm sure we are looking forward to be meeting again in the 3rd episode, our next Bible challenge in Truthful. So stay tuned with us and hope to see you again in the next episode. Truthful.